big finale.
Hello, welcome to the first edition of the Big Finale. Some of you may remember a podcast years and years ago called The Big Finale. In fact, I launched that podcast in January 2006. At the time, I'd been doing a book review segment on a nationally syndicated program, Monster Radio. In January 2006, which seems like yesterday, by the way, I contacted a now defunct website called Fan Talk Live. In fact, it was fantalklive.com. And I purchased a monthly time slot on their internet radio station. The shows weren't even available on iTunes. Ironically, most, if not all, of the shows on the website were wrestling related. This is ironic because I had been a wrestling promoter in the late 1990s. Not a very successful one, but a wrestling promoter nonetheless. So my program was vastly different and very unpopular at the time. My first guest was Ben Chapman, who played the Gill Man on the original The Creature from the Black Lagoon. He was a very entertaining guest. In fact, before commercial breaks, he would say, "Let me hold my breath underwater," and other equally entertaining comments. The show content changed, though, by week 2. I had been contacting Patrick Heron in 2005 to appear on Monster Radio. I had heard him on Coast to Coast AM and was very impressed with him as a potential guest. When Monster Radio imploded, I invited him on my new internet radio show, not thinking he would have any interest in doing so. After all, it went from syndicated in 85 radio markets, Monster Radio, to the Big Finale podcast that nobody was listening to. One morning at work, I was shocked, I was surprised to find a voice message from Patrick Heron, all the way from Ireland. So my second episode was with Patrick Heron, and I proceeded to rob Coast to Coast AM of all their Christian-leaning guests, like Tom Horn, Mike Heiser, David Flynn, and Lynn Marzulli. I even contacted some more mainstream Bible prophecy teachers like Ken Parsons, who had appeared on Coast to Coast AM. Parsons has since disappeared. Some of my guests have also passed away. My first 2 guests, Ben Chapman, Patrick Heron, have passed away. Among them, of course, were Patrick Heron and Ben Chapman, but also folks like David Flynn and Jerry Smith also passed away, as did Hilmar von Campe. Also, probably many others who have dropped off my radar are gone. One of the really bad traits I got into when I did the Big Finale was that if I liked you as a guest, I had you on the program time and time again. I've tried to remedy that habit in recent years. Actually, I feel like I've learned a lot since those early days. I now host the Bruce Collins Show, which is on AM radio in Florida, and I've tried to rectify some of my early missteps. One of the things I used to do on the Big Finale is I would have really basic rules on how to do an interview, and I usually had a set of questions before me and never any preparation or any thought of what to do when my questions ran out, and I had all sorts of extra time. That happened several times. Once I concluded the program after 45 minutes, and another time my guests were supposed to go the full hour. We were done in 30 minutes. So I just went on and on about the economy. The original Big Finale was live, so there was no wiggle room. When it was time to go, we had to go. And when there was 30 minutes of open space and no content, you just went for it. Despite all of that, I actually enjoyed doing live shows. So I was on fantalklive.com for probably 2 years, and then Rick Hendrickson made me a better deal. Plus, Fan Talk Live seemed to be going away at that point. The person that ran it wasn't really interested in continuing. When I was on Fan Talk Live, after a while, other programs began to appear, and one of them was another paranormal show called The Light of Day. After speaking also with Lynn Marzulli several times, I actually paid for an additional hour on Fan Talk Live so he could do a show. His show at that time was not called Acceleration Radio, it was called Spiral of Life Radio. There are very few episodes of the big finale out there today. It wasn't popular, although surprisingly every once in a while I run into people who say that they like that show better than what I'm doing today. It isn't the majority of people, but every once in a while I'll come by someone who says, I really liked the big finale and I really liked what you were doing. Most people don't even remember it. So it wasn't that popular, and I would have to believe that only a handful of people overall listened at any given time. However, I think it did grow a bit as I interviewed more and more of the quote-unquote Christian coast-to-coast AM guests. Even though it was only 2006 to 2007, you could see different things going on. I could see Tom Horn kind of positioning himself as the hub of everything concerning this Christian coast-to-coast stuff that Chad and I used to call fringe. Let's talk about that word fringe for a second, and then we'll get back to the movement itself and also the history of the big finale. I don't know where Chad and I came up with that word specifically, but it was something that sounded cool when describing our show, the big finale. Later on, of course, I used it to describe the Fringe Radio Network, another venture I started with Rick Hendrickson. There's some controversy, I guess, over who first coined the term fringe. Johnny McMahon believes it was him, and to his credit, his webpage did describe the Iron Show as fringe. Chad and I think we did it on the air, but it could just be that we both used that term around the same time, so who knows. I'm more than willing to take credit for it, though. There were two popular shows that started before the big finale, and they were Future Quake with Dr. Future and Tom Bionic, and PID Radio with Derek and Sharon Gilbert. Neither of these shows were using the term fringe at that time, so I would have to say that the original program that started the fringe movement was the big finale. So that's what I'm convinced of. Okay, back to our story. So you could see back then that Tom had an idea about this stuff long before his television program on Christian TV or even before his publishing company. And I say that because Tom brought all of us together back then. He knew all the players, and he somehow got it to revolve all around his website, which at the time was called Raiders News Update. Now at this point, many of you know that I have had a falling out with a lot of these people. It may surprise you to know that I'm not going to attack these people on the program today, or next week, or the following week. That's not where I'm going with this show, the big finale. I'm just telling the history this week of how the show came about and the timeline, and to establish the fact for new listeners that this program has actually been around a long time. As a matter of fact, it set the precedent. The fact is, I did have a falling out, though, and in 2009, a lot of other changes took place. I had Chad Miles, for one thing, join me as a co-host. Before Chad joined the show, and by this time, the show was called The Bruce Collins Show. I also had Jeffrey Rott and David Lowe as hosts of the big finale. I'm happy to say that my co-hosts, Jeffrey Rott, David Lowe, and now Chad Miles, were all excellent choices, and they are all high-quality people of great integrity. So the big finale has been on the shelf for a long time. I've had some people tell me that the big finale was their favorite version of the programs I have done. So it's always been in the back of my mind to bring the big finale back, but I never had a clear vision of what I wanted to do with it until now. I have brought it back several times in small periods of time. And it basically was an extension of the Bruce Collins Show. It never had its own voice. It never had its own personality. But now I've decided on some certain parameters to put on this program. And I think it's going to be very exciting. Let me just say that my radio hosting style has changed a lot. And we have some interesting perspectives, one would argue, if you listen to the Bruce Collins Show. Not only has my radio hosting style changed, but so have some of my tastes in radio. I think that's a normal thing. I don't think any of us have the same tastes as we did in 2006. Case in point, a lot of people who listen to the big finale are not even interested in that type of show anymore. Many listeners who would be interested in that type of show are new. There's always a revolving door when it comes to your audience. People coming in, people discovering you, people leaving. It happens. Speaking of the former point, my radio hosting style, that has changed a lot since 2006. In 2006, I really didn't have any ideas about how to host a radio program. At some point early on, I figured out that I better do some studying to try to become better at hosting if I really do love what I'm doing. And I've applied that training on my own to the Bruce Collins Show. You won't hear that on the big finale because, to be honest, the big finale is going to be a relaxed atmosphere. The Bruce Collins Show, I've tried to put all of my training and all of my hard work into that program. This is going to be more of the real me. Whereas you can see on the Bruce Collins Show, there are characters playing parts. This is no holds barred. If you want to itch your chin or swallow, it's fine. We're not going to edit it out. We're just going to be ourselves. Now, I've tried to become a better radio host, but that's not necessarily for the sake of garnering more fans per se. But if I love to do something, I do want to get better at it. I think you're probably the same way. If you've got a hobby, something you love, even your job, you want to be better at what you do. So I studied a lot of how to do things revolving around radio. I read a lot of books, I watched a lot of videos, I asked questions, and I tried to work very hard to make sure I covered the content that was important to cover in an interview. And here's where I pat myself on the back. Sorry, but I'm going to do that a little bit. But really, I just want to acknowledge the hard work paid off. It really did. I now know how to examine a book or do research on someone so that I'm able to capture the important information in an interview. When I look at the Bruce Collins Show, personally, this is just me personally, I can't say how you look at it. I can't say how someone in another part of the United States listens to the Bruce Collins Show and how they process it. They may hate it. But when I look at the Bruce Collins Show, or maybe more accurately, when I hear the Bruce Collins Show, I do know that we can continuously improve and that it can always be better. But at this point, I'm not sure how. Whether it is the opening segment or the interview, we really bust our tail to make sure the show has superior content and that we are touching all bases, trying to incorporate humor, facts, and fascination into every radio broadcast. I purposely don't listen to most other radio shows because, number one, I don't want to pick up the bad habits of other people. I have enough bad habits on my own that I'm working on in terms of radio hosting. But I don't want to pick up other people's bad habits. The other thing is, I don't want to copy what other people are doing. I've listened to some other shows in the fringe genre, and I've seen that they've gradually picked up our humor, even doing some of our, even doing skits that seem very familiar, if I can put it that way. So I don't want to do that. And it's not because I couldn't gain possibly more listeners. It's because I want this to be original, and I want it to be through our own hard work, our application of what we think is best for the program. Sure, I'm biased about what I do, but I defy anyone to find a better show all around than The Bruce Collins Show. There are shows more popular, to be sure, but they received their popularity by attaching themselves to guests who are more famous than they are. That has been a problem in the fringe arena, by the way. Pat each other on the back, and we can become more popular and maybe make more money. Quite frankly, I have a problem with achieving any respect for the show outside of our own talent. I don't align my work with the guests. I don't see this work as being for money. I see it as being for art, among other things. I don't want to ride people's coattails to get more listeners. There's no reason to do that. I'm not worried about ratings. I want to look back on a body of work that excels in excellence, not in earbud usage or in dollars collected. That's just me. And as I sit here and talk to you, I think we've achieved that, or at least we're very long down the path of achievement. I think you listening to this broadcast is the proof. All the hard work and the time and the research that we put into the Bruce Collins Show has been honored by your listenership. You obviously like quality when you hear it. Too many hosts are lazy, and too many listeners can't tell the difference. I've been told by many popular hosts, and I have witnessed it, that many of them do not research their guests. That might seem unbelievable, but not only is it believable, it's the norm. If their guest has a book, they don't read the book. If their guest has an expertise, they don't try to understand that expertise. I remember interviewing Jerome Corsi for a book he wrote about Obama, and then hearing him on one of the most popular fringe couples podcasts, and it was obvious the host hadn't even read the book. Painfully obvious. And then on Facebook, I saw people gushing about how great the interview was and how this person was the greatest interviewer ever. It wasn't true. This person had no idea that the guest was probably rolling his eyes with each question that was gleaned off of YouTube and had nothing to do specifically with the author's book. The conversation, again, had nothing to do with the book that was written. Imagine buying that book based on the interview and realizing it covered none of the ground that you heard on the podcast. That's not cool. That's not good to your listeners. You gave your listeners something that had nothing to do with what you advertised it as. Do your homework. So we really try hard here to earn your listenership. It's sort of politically incorrect these days to tell people how good or how high the quality of your work is these days. It's misconstrued for boasting. However, if I don't say it, it might not be known. I ask you not to believe a word I say, by the way. Just give it a chance and see if it doesn't ring true. If you were going in for a raise at your job and the person asked you, "What do you do?" wouldn't you tell them honestly? That's what I'm doing here. Although I'm not trying to get a promotion. I'm not trying to get money. I'm trying to establish a fact and set the record straight. I'm very happy with the Bruce Collins Show, obviously. So, is the Bruce Collins Show different than the big finale? Yes, it definitely is. Here's where we shift our focus to the big finale. In the years that followed after the big finale, the Bruce Collins Show has somewhat morphed into a variety show of sorts. We have an opening segment that is almost always steeped with sort of a fantasy element, or as we call it, the theater of the mind. There's a Bruce Collins character on that part of the show. It's me, but it isn't me. Same thing with Chad. We have to tweak who we are to make the humor work, and I think that part of the show has really been hitting its stride in recent months. And that's an original thing that we've done for this program. Then there is the interviews on the Bruce Collins Show. I defy anyone to come up with a show that does a better job getting to the heart of an interview. Even our guests talk about it, as you can hear from the opening credits to the show. And by the way, those sentiments expressed by those guests was never solicited by me. They were always told to me after the interview was over. And I thought, it's time our listeners heard this. It's time that they know for a fact that we respect them enough that if they're going to listen to the show, we're going to do our best. So from 10 years of working hard to continually improve myself and the program, I think that the Bruce Collins Show today is a vastly superior program than it used to be. Yes, the content has changed, but I think that's been a plus. Nothing is stale on that program. It is constantly changing. We'll be right back with more of the big finale. The big finale is my way of holding on to some of my past, but perhaps from my new perspective. I'm not as naive as I used to be, and it would be disingenuous for me to pretend that I am the same person. After all, you are not the same person you were 10 years ago, right? Things have changed. You look at some things differently. Some of your opinions have changed. Surely you have gained new knowledge and new perspective in your life over the course of 10 years. I have also. But where the Bruce Collins Show is a variety show that has its fingers in every cookie jar, the big finale will be my venture back into the roots of my radio experience, and that is within the fringe elements that exist. Now, the big finale will not be on AM radio, at least that's not what I'm planning to do with it, and at least not in the beginning. It will be our less promoted program on a weekly basis. Rest assured that even though the philosophies might be different between the Bruce Collins Show and the big finale, the quality will still exist in equal portions. If I can't be dedicated and committed to a task, then I won't do it. And so for me, I'm on board for giving 100% to both shows, not sacrificing the quality of one over the other. However, having two distinct and separate shows are probably my limit. We had played around with the idea of doing a show called Clapton Falls Overnight, which would have been the story of two people who had been fired from a local radio station at Clapton Falls, California, which is a fictitious town. And I had been building it up a little bit on the Bruce Collins Show that we were headed in that direction. But we never ended up doing that, and partly because we realized that putting together a show like that would have been a huge, monumental task. And so we've incorporated some elements, some theater of the mind type elements on the Bruce Collins Show, but doing an all-out fictitious story would have taken a tremendous amount of time. Unfortunately, too much time for me to be able to dedicate working full-time right now. But perhaps in the future, you never know, maybe we'll get back to that idea. However, like I said, for those of you who listen to the Bruce Collins Show, you know there is already an element there that's theater of the mind, and that's something we intend to keep doing on The Bruce Collins Show. This means rarely, if ever, would I appear as a guest on another program in order to support my work. I'm just doing too much. There's too many guests that I have to research, too many ideas that I need to kick around, too many edits that I need to do, too many periods of time that I need to schedule between whether it's Chad and I, and Gabe Reed, who plays the part of Colin S. Collins on The Bruce Collins Show, and also will be himself here on the big finale. So there's a lot of things that go into creating two distinct, separate 1 hour a week radio programs. Likewise, in addition to not appearing as a guest, I'm not going to venture into joint programs as I did with The Revolving Door. That program, unfortunately, was a failure from the beginning, and I'm not pointing any fingers. It just was something that never really got off the ground with any appropriate discipline effort between all four parties. It really showed the differences between podcasters and radio hosts like myself. Radio hosts are resolved to commit their time every week to ensure that they have content ready to go each and every week. You develop a rhythm, a pattern, and you become accustomed to quality output regularly. And you practice. You get a lot of experience broadcasting because you're doing it every week. A podcaster, by contrast, well, they complete their tasks usually as they see fit. And on a weekly program like The Revolving Door, that became an issue, a constant issue of getting content out on time and regularly. Again, that's no fault of anyone's. It unfortunately is just an inevitability. If you're a podcaster and you're not really concerned with being on target for a certain time and people are okay with that, then that's your rhythm, that's your pattern. If you're a radio host and you know every single week at a certain time you need to be ready to produce a radio program, you get used to it. And in fact, you go overboard with that. You err on the side of safety. I'm several weeks with the Bruce Collins Show ahead of schedule. I never have to worry if a guest cancels at the last minute. I never have to worry if something falls through. I have alternate plans. I have multiple guests per week, even though usually only one guest interview airs per show. Sometimes two, but usually one. So I personally am very pleased to be able to bring you two separate audio programs of my highest quality, my highest grade to you every week. I believe if you give us a listen, I think you'll be satisfied regularly. And you're probably thinking, why would I start this program off with a long-winded introduction? Because I'm trying to explain and build up what we're going to do with this program. I think you're going to be genuinely pleased at the uniqueness, genuinely pleased at the content, at the perspective. You may not always agree with it, but you're going to be pleasantly surprised and pleasantly rewarded each week as we start to build into a regular formatted program like the big finale. And again, we're taking our time with this. We're going to reveal it slowly. We're also in the coming weeks going to play an original episode from the early years, and then you can see how much we've evolved from where we were at to where we are going to be now as we launch this new program, the big finale. There have been a few times in the last 10 years when I wanted to give up, just stop recording. I have to say, though, that I have not been this excited and motivated as right now. I'm not motivated by people applauding. I'm not motivated by thankfulness. I'm not motivated by money. I'm actually motivated because I really enjoy doing this. And that's the only reason. For whatever reason, most shows, many shows I should say, are more popular than this one. I actually think this one is one of the better ones. That may be my ego? I don't know. But I do this show not for ratings and not for appreciation. I do this because I love doing it. And that is what has sustained me over the years. Whereas when I first started, it was very much about being recognized, or at least that fulfilled me and kept me going. And I've seen many people fall by the wayside who did not receive recognition for all the hard work they did, and they gave up. For me, I couldn't be happier. I know what I'm putting out there is good content. I know there's a positive message in the Bruce Collins Show. I know that people are listening. And that's awesome. But honestly, I do it because I love doing it. That old saying, and I never knew what that old saying meant until I came across radio, but the old saying where they talk about living your dreams, living your passion, would you do them if you didn't get paid to do them? I would, because I'm doing it right now. I love doing a radio program. And I thought I wanted to do professional wrestling. I thought I wanted to promote it. I thought I wanted to write. I used to write. I published a few books. They weren't that great. I'm not selling them. But this is where it's at. This is what I love to do. And the very first time as a book reviewer on Monster Radio, when I got on the air, something clicked inside of me, and it was like, wow, this is what I want to do. And so for 10 years, and from the outside world, you could say I've gone nowhere in 10 years, but in 10 years, the product has changed. Maybe not the amount of listeners, although I think that has changed a little bit, but the product has changed, and it is so much better today than it used to be. So, again, re-emphasizing, I haven't been this excited and motivated since I started. I love the ideas we're doing on the Bruce Collins Show, and I love the ideas we're planning for this program, the big finale. I love the creativity, and I love the overall output. I love what we're putting out on the air on WWPR 1490 AM and also IPBN-FM.com. And you can also hear archives at Fringe Radio Network. Honestly, I really don't listen to other programs that much or other radio hosts. I did something kind of harsh recently that people probably thought was a knock. I unfriended a bunch of radio hosts in the Fringe movement. And it was because I didn't want to, and I unfriended several people who were friends of theirs that frequently post about comets hitting the Earth, the flat Earth, alien disclosure, Nephilim, all of that stuff. I unfriended quite a few of those people. If you post that kind of stuff and I'm still your friend, don't worry. I'm not on a rampage. But those people and the radio hosts that were involved, to be honest, it wasn't good for me to digest that every time I logged into Facebook. And I was reacting in unpositive ways. And so it's better for me not to see it. It's nothing personal. I'm not against those people as people. I may be against some of their messages, but I'm not against them as people. And it's just that I really wasn't interested in seeing their content. Now, if you were one of those people I've unfriended, you can still access the program by liking the Bruce Collins Show page on Facebook. And it was nothing personal that I unfriended you. But honestly, I'm not looking for ratings, so if it offended you, I am sorry. But it wasn't good for me to see that stuff all the time on Facebook. I go on to Facebook to enjoy it, also to market the show, but to enjoy Facebook, and I really didn't want to see that stuff anymore. Again, though, you can still keep in touch with the Bruce Collins Show by liking that Facebook page. I'm not sure yet if we'll do a big finale Facebook page. We'll see. But you can definitely keep in touch through the Bruce Collins Show on Facebook. You can also like the YouTube channel for the Bruce Collins Show. And there's various other things you can do to keep in touch with us. It's just from my own personal Facebook. When I would go on there, there was so much dark news, so much depressing stuff coming from Christians, and people I have no doubt are Christians. I'm not questioning that. It just wasn't good for me, and it wasn't anything that I needed to see on a daily basis. So, nothing personal. I wish you the best. I wish those radio hosts the best, and I just didn't want to be part of that anymore. So like I said, I really don't listen to other programs that much or other radio hosts. And it's not just because of the content. And I may have strange reasons, but I really don't listen to other programs and other hosts generally because I don't want to copy their work, and I don't want to also pick up any bad habits. What I mean by copying, I know when other shows are copying our content or modifying content that they have gleaned from this show. When people are doing, when people, for instance, have a theatrical part of their show and they have a phony device on their show that mimics something we did 6 years ago in Boston, I'm not sure I view it as a compliment, but it's probably another reason why I don't listen to other shows regularly. That kind of stuff bugs me. If I do something and it's original and I came up with that out of my mind, I don't really appreciate people copying it. I would rather they do something original. I don't want to be bugged by the fact that somebody's stealing our content and our ideas, and not only stealing them, but they are soliciting donations for them. That kind of bothers me. And I suspect many of you out there that would bother you too, if you were honest about it. About the only host I would listen to daily, and the one I respect the most as a host, not necessarily as their content, is Art Bell. Now, again, don't get me wrong, I probably disagree with Art Bell on many of his opinions, but I'm saying as a radio host, he's very hard to beat. Genetics plays into that. He has a great voice, but he's also a great interviewer, and I can appreciate that. Even though Art Bell could be scaring the pants off you with stories about Area 51 or shadowy spies and time travelers warning of imminent doom, Art's voice said, "Don't worry, we'll get through this together." Nobody today can duplicate Art Bell, let's be honest. He was head and shoulders above the rest. By the way, does it bother me that Christian paranormal hosts mask themselves as ministries? Yes, absolutely, but we will not be addressing that issue tonight, and maybe never. Maybe that is partly why I kicked around the idea of returning to the big finale. Art Bell left radio yet again. I was sad to see him go again, but I had my suspicions. It isn't like this is the first time. So here I am with a brand new program, but not a specific direction to take it yet. I have some ideas. But let me clue you in, at least, on what is in my mind regarding this show. I think that a program is needed that addresses the paranormal and conspiratorial with some unvarnished truth, with absolutely no agenda. Now, before you say this type of program exists, I would ask you who is doing that. Who in all of the conspiracy and paranormal and UFO world is trying to really get to the truth? I say there's none. I say that all of this is shrouded in agendas. Agendas that are fear-based. Agendas that bring in money. Agendas that are based on everything from buying secret information to survivalist food. Agendas are everywhere. But truth is a scarce commodity, because truth, real truth, is generally free, and people often confuse free as meaning cheap. But lies are not more valuable than truth, and I wouldn't even say that lies are valuable. I would, however, say that they can be very costly. So a program in this genre that really started the fringe movement, the big finale. The big finale can do wonders. It can divide the wheat from the chaff, and that is what is needed today. I do not have an agenda. I do not wish ill will on anyone. Yes, I have opinions. Yes, I believe there are insincere people who pull on the heartstrings of the public, but I say before you and before God that I know the difference between opinion and truth. Opinion is what I think, and truth is what it is. Sometimes those line up, sometimes they do not. That's true of everyone. I can say before you that I make mistakes. I can say before you that I have had pride issues before. I can tell you that I'm not perfect. But my agenda, if you can call it that, is to create another unique show, but one that is completely different from the uniqueness of the Bruce Collins Show. I want to set the bar. No one is setting the bar. People are producing what they think their base supporters want to hear. That's not the truth, folks. That's not honest. We launched The Fringe. Now it is time for the big finale to launch the Real Truth movement. It is way past time. Everyone is friending everyone else, tying into everyone else, supporting everyone else, trying to make money together. That's not right if it's not the truth. We will invite guests on this program. We will challenge some of them. We will not resort to non-substantive attacks. We will simply talk about the truth. There might be comedy, and some of that might look like an attack. But in the end, the only thing that we can prove is whether or not someone is telling the truth or not. The big finale will set new trends, as the Bruce Collins Show has done. We will be the kind of show that none other dares to become, because the other shows are concerned with how they are viewed by their peers and by their listening audience. I am not. I have always wanted to be truthful, despite my failings, despite all the wrong I have personally done in my life. Radio is something I have never tried to compromise. Not wanting to compromise the quality, the creativeness that comes from within, and not from duplicating others, but also the determination to be a beacon of a finely balanced scale of entertainment and information. That's what I've attempted to do, and although we haven't been perfect, we have almost hit the bullseye on many more occasions than most radio hosts, even syndicated radio hosts, have achieved. That comes from a lot of hard work, a lot of unspoken hard work. Now a word about you. I've always respected my audience and tried never to insult their intelligence. That is why over the years you've probably become accustomed to me stating that I didn't necessarily always agree with my guests. I have to make that clear to you. Look, I'm a radio host. That's how I see myself. Many people claim to be ministers. Many claim to be a combination of a radio host and an expert. But I'm your classic radio host. I put all my energy into making the best show possible, not selling books or merchandise or trying to get on the next show to sell something. I'm a host, period. We're going to have fun with the big finale. I promise you will enjoy it. And if you loved it before, then I have a high bar that is placed before me. But guess what? I like that challenge. For those of you who listen to the Bruce Collins Show on a regular basis, and if you do not, I ask you why. But if you listen to the show on a regular basis, you might have heard something a bit unusual in the dialogue around December and January, and that was the Clapton Falls Overnight. That was the show we were going to try to do. But there was no basis in fact of that story. Not a shred of it was true. Again, this was because we had thought about introducing a fictitious program called Clapton Falls Overnight on ipbn-fm.com. I was very serious about doing it and had lined up some voice actors. I had even created a storyline for about 5 episodes, but as we got closer to the date, again, I just realized that I could not devote that kind of time to a radio play. Lining up all those voice actors, scripting all of it, would have been a tremendous amount of work. Now, I do fantasy bits here and there on the programs I do, the Bruce Collins Show, but a whole hour based on a fictitious town where you have to connect the dots to several mysteries, it sounds like fun, but it's also a great amount of work. Perhaps if I won the lottery, or a big pile of greenbacks fell on my yard, then I might be able to devote the necessary time needed to create a radio program of that magnitude. But one thing I will say, I'm going to pour a lot of originality into the Bruce Collins Show or the big finale. That's my intention. You may like it, you may not like it. Either way, that's fine. But the one thing you have to admit, I do work hard, I do try to be creative, I do try to keep things fresh, and I do try to earn your listenership. I've been asked before, what kind of rating do we get on radio? Well, the truth is, the station is not Arbitron rated, which means I haven't got a clue. The city of Bradenton, Florida is 50,000 people, and the station is 800 watts. Not a mega station to be sure, but it extends past Bradenton, and I believe it touches parts of Tampa. I do know people in that area have listened to the show. I just don't know how many. I know I've seen likes to the Bruce Collins Show Facebook page from people in Bradenton. That's always a good sign. In fact, this is a greater sign than someone who finds our show or any other show on the internet and likes it. That is someone who is not out there just listening to my old podcast. Remember, they caught our show on AM radio, and they see the value of it in the context of whatever else is on AM radio. That's a high compliment. And also, we were going head-to-head with Coast to Coast AM at that hour in Florida. So, that's not too shabby at all. That is a testimonial right there. I should mention that we, of course, have moved to Thursday nights on WWPR, now at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. That is very good news because we will now automatically have more exposure to the AM listeners at this earlier hour, and one could probably argue that more people are listening to AM radio on Thursday nights at 10 p.m. than Friday night at midnight, although I'm not positive that is true. Okay, now for those of you who don't know who in the world I am, here's a bit of an intro of myself. Bruce Collins is a former pro wrestling promoter, an author of 3 published books, and the former book reviewer of Monster Radio, which was nationally syndicated in 84 radio markets. Bruce has hosted the Bruce Collins Show since January 2006. The Bruce Collins Show graduated to AM radio in 2009 and spent 2 years broadcasting at WSMN 1590 AM in Nashua, New Hampshire, and WWZN 1510 AM in Boston, Massachusetts. Currently, the program resides at WWPR 1490 AM, Tampa, Florida. Based on the AM radio exposure, he was approached by the History Channel's Decoded TV with best-selling author Brad Meltzer to audition for the program. After learning he would have to interview occultists and numerologists without expressing his own opinions, he turned down the invitation. Bruce's grandfather was a pastor in various locations in the United States for over 50 years. And then I wrote, Bruce is the self-proclaimed Baron of Broadcasting and the Clown Prince of Doom. Of course, those are a little bit tongue-in-cheek. What is the Bruce Collins Show? The Bruce Collins Show is known as the new theater of the mind in a way that no other program is able to capture. It is an out-of-the-box program, having interviewed a plethora of guests such as Jesse Ventura, Kevin Trudeau, Gerald Celente, Alex Jones, Tex Mars, Larry Pratt, who is the president of Gun Owners of America, L.A. Marzulli, Congressman James Rogan, Stripers Michael Sweet, twice, Megadeth's Dave Ellefson, actor Brett Wagner, stuntman Chris Carnell, WorldNet Daily's Joseph Farah, Wally Famous Amos, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Ben Chapman, Patrick Heron, Liz Peek, Joe Ortiz, Jack Abramoff, Nick Redfern, Politichick TV's Anne-Marie Murrell, Joshua P. Warren, former spokesman for President Bush, Pete Seat, Homer Hickam, whose life was portrayed in the October Sky movie, Micah Hanks, Rabbi Aria Spiro, Coast to Coast AM's John B. Wells, Ralph Epperson, Patrick Wood, Ray Comfort, wrestling legends Ivan Koloff and Jake the Snake Roberts, Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, Kurt Schlichter, Congressman Todd Aiken, Frank Joseph, financial analyst and author John Rubino, former managing editor of Forbes Stuart Pinkerton, Robert Kiyosaki, that's the rich dad, poor dad guy, Phyllis Schlafly, Jim Gilchrist, Father Jack Ashcraft, female wrestler Gail Kim, TNA wrestler Drew Galloway, wrestler Samoa Joe, David Limbaugh, Eric Schiffer, Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, former PLO terrorist Kamal Salim, Stephen Aaron Gray, also known as DJ Freaky Flow, Newsweek's Malik Kalan, Pamela Geller, Jim Mars, Muscle Shoals, music producer Rick Hall, actor Steve Rowland, machine gun preacher Sam Childers, the Masked Saint, author and wrestler Chris the Saint Whaley, Betty Andreasen, Jerome Corsi, the Collins brothers Trey Smith, former advisor to Donald Trump and author Roger Stone, Bum Fights Rufus Hanna, Eric Rush, Mike Heiser, Gary Franchi, former Major League ballplayer John Rocker, the late Dr. Stanley Monteith, and many, 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 many others. So that's the Bruce Collins Show. The big finale, well, it'll probably get a little weird from time to time, but we'll try to look at things as honestly as we can. And one of the unique perspectives and unique things we are going to do is a roundtable between two other guys who I consider to be very knowledgeable, very funny, have a lot of great insights, and that is Chad Miles and Gabe Reed. We hope you enjoy the big finale, week to week. Celebrating 10 years of great radio, over 500 episodes, and over 500 hours of radio content. Thank you.
Wow, those are some great questions.
I did my homework on you, obviously, and watched some previous...
Yeah, you sound like you did.
Great. Now, Bruce, that was such a good interview. I've done so many of these now. That was easily one of the best.
Great interview, Bruce. Thank you so much.
This was an awesome interview. Thank you so much.
You know, the ability, I've discovered in all the shows that I do and stuff, the ability to pack a lot of information in as an organization and, making up questions and stuff in advance.
Yeah.
And you're one of the few people who's ever done that. I wish more radio people would do it. A lot of them just wing it.
You actually read the book.
Thanks, Bruce. I really appreciate it. You asked really great questions. I really appreciate that.
Bruce, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this, talking with you.
That's a good question. And actually, I'm really glad you bring that up.
I don't know. That's a good question.